Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone from around the world. Thanks for joining us today for another series of the Workspot webinars. Today we have a fantastic set of speakers and a great topic for you guys in the civil engineering space, and really talking about GPU accelerated desktops, or in our case, cloud workstations, being used for some amazing things. Now we've got IT perspective today. We've got the CAD manager perspective today. So I encourage you to ask as many questions as you can along the way. This is your opportunity to talk directly, if you will, to this team to learn as much as you can. And remember, this is being recorded. So as soon as we're finished today, we'll get the recording and we can put it up online. I'll share that recording link with you. So if you missed part of it or a colleague of yours missed it, you can share it with them as well. And then feel free also afterwards to send me an email if you have additional questions. We'll follow up on those, okay? Now with the format today of today's webinar, we're gonna share tons of content with you, but we're also gonna interact. We're gonna have some polling questions that are kind of gonna come up soon. We wanna sort of talk to you, ask you questions about your world and get those responses, as well as you feel free to ask us questions anytime you like. We're not saving Q&A for the end. We're going to do it right throughout the webinar. All right. So I'll tell you what, to get going, let's start it off with our introductions today for our team from Sherwood Design Engineers. And let's kick it off with Chuck. Chuck, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and even where you're coming in from?
Great. Thanks, Brad. My name is Chuck Smith. I'm the Director of Technology for Sherwood Design Engineers. I've been here for almost 9 years. I live in Oakland, California, and I'm based out of our San Francisco headquarters office. Been working remotely since COVID began, and been happily working, on Workspot and providing that to our users too.
Nice. And thanks for joining us today and sharing your IT expertise on this whole experience of before, during, and after bringing Workspot in and changing this world of yours from physical devices and workstations to virtual and all the benefits associated with that. Thank you for that. And then next we have a perspective from the CAD manager, and that is Jim. So welcome, Jim. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're coming in from.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jim Grawl, and I've been doing this kind of work since before CAD was even a thing. I used to draw by hand back in the good old days, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur. But I've seen the whole evolution of this tool develop, and pretty amazing where we are relative to those old days. I live in Pinole, California. I'm also based out of the same office as Chuck in San Francisco. I've been with the firm Sherwood for about 7 years. Over the course of my entire career, I've been working in and out of CAD for 35 or more. Worked for probably a half dozen to 10 companies directly, and contracted with several others through my own contracting business.
Excellent. Well, hey, I know you guys have been all working remote lately, as a lot of people have, and folks want to hear that experience, and you guys have some great lessons learned that you're going to share today, so we're looking forward to that. First thing I'd like to do, though, is fire off a little polling question and ask you guys, get some dialogue going, find out where your primary work location is. So is that working from the office, or are you at home, or where are you at these days? Or maybe you've always worked at home. That's a possibility also. And so the notion of still working at home hasn't changed much, So let's go ahead and get the votes in. Let us know where it is that's your primary work location today. We've asked this several times over the last webinars, and we're looking for trends and patterns here to see where folks are currently working now, and maybe they have flexibility. Maybe you could be at home a little bit and at the office a little bit. It could be a blend, it could be a mix. All right, so once you get all your votes cast, then I'll go ahead and close the votes, and we can see the results. So let's go ahead and close those, share those. And so look at that, we've got a 50-50 split down the middle. Now that's higher than I've seen before. So I think offices are opening up and people are given that option. So Chuck, what about your space? How are you seeing this trend change?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing, the genie's out of the bottle. A lot of people we were all forced to work from home, right, for a good amount of time. And we found that we don't have to commute. Now we get 2 to 3 hours back every day, right? So now we have more flexibility on when we work, right, and how long we work, right? So maybe we take longer breaks in the middle afternoon, work later into the evening. But it definitely did not affect our efficiency, you know, and we've seen an increase in productivity, right, and getting projects out the door.
Well, that's amazing because with that, now you can really let people have the choice. Maybe some folks really liked working at home. Maybe they have a particular role where they really need to get back in the office and be shoulder to shoulder and collaborate more. But it sounds now it's like something that we couldn't do before. You could give them the choice to be most productive and have a kind of a work-life balance as well. So let's check out this next question we've got, which is, what are your biggest concerns supporting these folks that are at home? And this is a multiple choice, so you can pick your top two. So the idea here is like with folks working at home, is it security or is it productivity and performance, or is it cost, or is it the added support that I have to put in place? So let's go ahead and pick your top two of these in the voting, in the polling, and then we can compare that to what we've seen, you know, historically, as well as what you guys at Sherwood Design Engineers are feeling yourself. Okay, so with that, go ahead and cast all your votes here. And again, it's your biggest concern supporting folks that are running at home. And let's go ahead and get all the votes done. We'll close those, and we're going to share the results now. Across the board, everybody agrees that security is important. And then from there on, it looks like productivity as well is the second winner there. You can see there's a little bit on cost and additional support, but it's interesting, cost is the least. It's always security, but I tell you, when folks got locked down, it was like productivity was the highest. So those two have always rivaled each other. And so what do you think, Jim, from your perspective, from a CAD and a user perspective? Is productivity vitally important? Do you think about security? What's your impression?
I don't worry about security too much because that's clearly in Chuck's lane in the way our firm is set up. But I do know that it's a very high priority for Chuck, and we don't mess around. I'll let Chuck speak to that a bit more so. The productivity and performance is a huge issue, huge, but is a bigger worry, if you will, with managers and less so with the people doing the actual work. As a CAD manager, I'm a little bit unique in that I don't really focus on the ins and outs of the software. I'm much, much more concerned with the day-to-day working in the toolbox to do your job. And a lot of the productivity and performance wasn't impacted by working remote. It was the communication, right? People working amongst and with each other. And that was the big challenge and remains so today. So we're actually moving into more of a hybrid model. The great thing about the Workspot sessions that we have set up is you can take them anywhere. So you can work from home one day, be in the office the next day. If you need a meeting face to face, you need to sit down and look at paper drawings like we used to do in the old days, you can do that. And that's the flexibility that I'm impressed with. And I've been an advocate for this for 20 years. I've done a lot of independent contracting. I spent 10 years working from home raising kids. It to me it's a game changer. But Chuck, you should speak to that security issue a little bit because I know it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the very dangerous things you could do at a company is opening up your company, your servers to the internet, and opening up RDP is one of those. And so with Workspot, we didn't have to do that. We used Workspot and all of their security, right, for our users to work remotely. And it's worry-free on my end. I'm allowed to set up the Azure backend with my own security. I've installed my own firewall there, right? It's similar to all the firewalls I have at the rest of Sherwood. So I already know how to use it and program it, right? Monitor it. So it allowed that flexibility for me to just open a virtual office, right? And not worry about the security.
Yeah, that's amazing because we were talking about this before. Yesterday, you know, Yesterworld, we had all this hardware and these appliances and things we had to manage physically in the locations. And as more and more of those are actually offered in a virtual sense, you can drop that very same functionality and capability into the cloud. And so I think that's what you're saying. You can manage it now identically as you migrate from your physical world of various offices and data centers into a centralized and virtualized space into a cloud. It simplifies management and it keeps it all consistent. And I think more and more every year, every quarter that goes by, more of those vendors' products are made available in a virtual. Even if you have to install it and manage it entirely yourself, you can do that in the cloud. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, and then Jim, on your side, you were talking about productivity and 10 years of experience working remotely and all the different technology that's happened over those years and more, 20. And so now you are able to go to multiple places. You can take off and go, skiing, fishing, in the cabin, what?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do a little bit of ski patrol in the wintertime. And this last year with COVID, I have to say it wasn't a big change for me. I was able to travel up to the mountains, work remotely from the mountains, get my skiing time in, return when I needed to. The flexibility is amazing. Now, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was doing contract and working remotely, it was things like Vault, Dropbox, and emails, shooting files back and forth. And the potential for overwriting someone else's work was a huge hurdle. Accidentally copying a file down from your email on top of something that was more current. The workflow was very difficult to manage. We did it, but these tools today, Workspot included, makes it almost seamless.
Well, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah, and that's the story we're gonna tell today. And I like to start everything off with a punchline. It's like, what are we really covering? What's the point? What's the purpose and the intention and so forth? And it's essentially at the core, it's the on-prem data center world is migrating into the cloud. Now, there's a lot of elements in that because it isn't just the data center; it's also the devices that users are using. So you can think about this as authentication services and data services, and also storage or even database, and those sorts of things making their way into the cloud, and then also the desktop as well. Because remember, the desktop and the users are running on the desktop, they're running their applications. And on the applications, those apps need access to the data. So if the desktops with the apps are in the cloud, and the data that they're hammering on is also in the cloud, then the only thing that's not in the cloud is the user. So if you can actually put that whole cloud thing within 30 or 40 milliseconds away from the user, then the user can actually manage all of that stuff and run it all remotely, and it feels like it's local because it's close enough by, and yet it's screaming fast in the cloud. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's what this slide here actually says. The Workspot Cloud desktops on Azure and Google Cloud, we support both clouds now, is the notion of centralizing and virtualizing it in that cloud region of the world as close to that user as possible and minimize that latency. So they're working away. And it just feels like it's local, but it isn't. It's in the cloud. We're going to talk about that architecture, how to do that, what it feels like, the relative cost differences and so forth. And then you can see 1, 2, 3, how these folks, Chuck, Jim sent folks home and what happened, what were the lessons learned, and what's happening next? What does this mean now? If they figured this out before as thought leaders, they're still thought leaders and they're thinking forward again, and we're going to share with you what that actually means also. Now, to start this off, let's learn more about Sherwood, the company, and then you'll understand, the civil engineering and the folks that are there, the engineers and the applications they're running and the projects they're working on. In fact, this very first project I happen to be familiar with, that big, huge tent dome thing right there, I guess is the Google structure that you guys were involved in. And that's pretty amazing. I walked on the trails for years and saw this thing being built from the beginning. And it's an impressive project. You guys are involved in so many different projects around the world. So Chuck, let's share a little bit on the company. Oh, and by the way, I am encouraging everyone on the webinar to ask questions. Go into the question box anytime along the way, and we'll vector those questions right in and address them. All right. Kick it off, Chuck, with a little on Sherwood. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, at Sherwood, all of our projects do focus on sustainability in one aspect or the other. And this is why Sherwood is selected to work on these projects by other design firms. So typically, most of our work is given, or, we're asked to participate in a major project, right? And our focus is specifically on water and wastewater systems or sea level rise, or other aspects that have an environmental impact, right? We want to make sure that every project that we touch is sustainable. So Sherwood, has now, when I started at Sherwood back in 2013, early 2013, we were only 22 people. So we have rapidly expanded to almost 102 now. And we also have 11 contractors who are actively helping us. Some of them are actually on Workspot with us. So there's no Dropbox and sending files back and forth, right? We gave them Workspot access and they can work directly on our data. And that has just improved efficiency tremendously. We have 5 offices studios in California. And like I mentioned earlier, our HQs in San Francisco. We have 1 office in Atlanta, and we have 1 in New York that is growing pretty fast too. As for projects, you know, we have them spanning the globe. You'll see that here in a slide here shortly. But really exciting times, you know, at our company, and glad Workspot has been able to, you know, help us be flexible in our growth and retain our staff during, you know, these times of COVID. So.
And that's amazing. You guys started small and grew as fast as you did. And now, as we continue through this presentation, you're going to talk about the opportunity now to be able to hire talent really from anywhere and kind of grow organically based on your core skill set, applying that anywhere in the world and helping people out there because you can without having to open expensive offices and deals like that as well. And then you've got this quote here, as I think you mentioned a little earlier.
Yeah, I spoke to this already, just a little, but you know, I'll speak to the water part in this slide. We have some teams at Sherwood dedicated just to water systems and wastewater systems. We're seeing a lot of traction there, and wastewater plants that need to be rebuilt, you know, or built from scratch, and then systems that are very old, you know, that need to be replaced. And so this is our opportunity to come in and have net zero water, right? And have gray water and use it for irrigation, doing green roofs, you know, and that reduces the urban heating effect, you know, that we're all seeing now with global temperature rising, you know, and it's an exciting time. We're doing a lot of climate simulations too. That's part of probably most of the exciting work that I've seen this last year is simulating temperature and wind and how global warming is affecting all of this, and how buildings and structures and actually the amount of green space actually affects it all tremendously.
That's amazing. And it is the digital age. So the better software tools you have, the faster CPU, GPU, networks, solid state drives that you have enables those design engineers to do all those inspirational things that you just mentioned. And you have them scattered in many locations around the world, I see.
Yeah, when I started at Sherwood, we only had 2 offices in San Francisco and New York, you know, and we had a lot of projects in Asia at the time. I remember staff were traveling there. But then it just exploded. You know, we started getting projects in South America, especially in Central America and the Caribbean. And then there's a few in Europe and Africa and Middle East. Recently, we've seen some growth, you know, there, some project needs. You know, most of our work is in the United States, but it is our plan to continue to grow internationally, right? We could be a global presence and making sure that we're, you know, maintaining or trying to make sure that we're being sustainable across the world. Right, not just in California, right, or not just the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, it's worth mentioning that while we pride ourselves in a lot of this cutting edge engineering and design, we still have to do the old fashioned stuff too. We still have to worry about, you know, the existing systems, how to dig a ditch, how to design those holes. So we may be up there in the clouds, pardon the pun, but we still have our feet pretty firmly planted on the ground in old school civil engineering.
Yeah.
They have to work together, and they do.
Yeah, and you also have that old world of a lot of physical machines that are out there that you've got to retire and move into virtual. So it's the parts that can be leveraged virtual that, by the way, remember that polling question, security and productivity, right? If you can actually retire physical into virtual to increase your security and your productivity, while you still have to do physical things like civil engineering, you know, it's like it's a perfect blend and it allows collaboration. It seems much better as well. And then, so this slide here, is this across the different areas of focus that you have?
Yeah, primarily, like Jim mentioned, you know, we do a lot of the traditional civil engineering work, working with structural engineers and architects. Like I mentioned earlier too, a lot of our focus is on water and ecological systems. We also do a lot of GIS work. So we're getting into the realm of doing land analysis, right? Slope analysis, viewshed analysis, right? That's a good bulk of the work we're doing too, which is
Thanks.
required for almost every project now these days.
Yes, and then with that, you guys, you figured out that physical wasn't cutting it anymore. And at some point you engaged with Workspot. And I love how you put together this timeline to sort of tell that story. Now, the folks that are listening in today to the webinar, take a look at this timeline. Chuck is going to talk about what it took to get from point A to point B and C and so forth along the way. If you have any questions, let him know. And so I'll let you jump into that, Chuck, and then Jim, add some color if you like.
Sure, yeah. So as everyone knows, we were all sent home in March, and fortunately Sherwood had LogMeIn Central installed on every computer. So for those who already didn't have LogMeIn access, we provided that to them. They were able to remote in to their computer at work at the physical location, and then just continue working. And we started to hear from staff about it. When you work in CAD on a technology like LogMeIn, there is definite lag that you notice. There's also some monitor scaling issues. LogMeIn always shows the resolution, by default of the monitor at work. Well, at home, maybe you have a 14-inch monitor that's not as high res as work, right? So everything was scaled down. People are having trouble reading things. So we realized this isn't going to work long term, and we don't know how long COVID's going to last. All right, so Jim and I teamed up, and we started researching right in April, and looking at various products like, we could do Citrix, we could do RDP, we can maybe look at other solutions like LogMeIn, right? We came across Workspot, got pretty excited about some of the reviews we heard, and just the concept, right, of having virtual computers in the cloud. And so we wanted to test it. So in May, we reached out to Workspot, and we got a sandbox, and we picked 10 of our users, hand selected, various roles at Sherwood, and we just wanted them to try it for a week, and they did. We put some data up there. They logged in. They told us, wow, this is so much better than LogMeIn. Please get this for us, right? And that became a huge selling point. And then I did the, analytics on the cost and long-term savings and all that stuff. And we made the pitch, and it was approved. And so the first thing I had to do was spin up our own Azure subscription. And this is what I call the back end. This is where, just like opening a physical office, brick and mortar, I need a server rack, I need servers, I need a firewall, I need an internet connection, right? Probably some other things. With Azure, I needed a firewall, a domain controller, and I think that's it. And I had to set up some network stuff, right? I had to connect it to Workspot subscriptions so both of our networks can talk to each other. Because all I have to manage on Azure is the back end, my server. I do the updates, I reboot it when I want to. I control, who has access to what. And then Workspot actually takes care of the virtual desktops, right? So I may spin them up, reboot them, look at the logs, right? Help the users in that way, but Workspot actually runs the computers, right? They're responsible for that portion. So with both of our subscriptions talking, right, we're able to then have a virtual office in a whole, right? And this is where we have our remote users connecting in while they're at home to Workspot. And when they're in the office, typically they're connecting like they were pre-COVID to they're at their desktop, they're connecting to the server in San Francisco that's right next to them. But we're finding out too, they're also using Workspot in the office, right? And that's leading to some exciting, thoughts that we're having here. So in June, we completed that, and in July we selected our first 30 users for Workspot and deployed them, and it was great success. There was a couple issues here and there, but they're very minor, and people just abandoned LogMeIn. And we didn't take it away. We wanted to see if they were going back and forth, but majority of people just went completely 100% Workspot.
There are 2 holdouts.
Yeah, there was only 2 holdouts. And it was just education. It's like we just had to talk to them about it and really have them try it, and then they got it. And they're like, oh, I should have done this months ago. In September, we added an additional round of, I believe, 35 users. And today we're at a total of 79, which is 100% of our design staff, our DE1s through DE3s. And we also have a few project managers in there too, who are still using CAD these days. Like I mentioned earlier, this opens possibilities for the future. One thing that we're discussing is possibly going serverless. This is where Sherwood can buy laptops for everyone. Every every desk is a hotel desk. So you can go to New York or San Francisco, and all you do is you plug in your laptop to the dock. You have monitors already set up, right? And then I don't have to invest in servers at our offices. Everyone just connects to Workspot, right? And that has a huge cost savings. So we're still looking into this. We haven't made a decision yet, but now we have the option with Workspot to do that.
That's great. And by the way, I see, oh, sorry, Jim, jump in. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna toss in a couple of things real quick. One, DE, by the way, is design engineer, for those of you who don't use those acronyms in your job descriptions. And so we have 1, 2, 3, that's entry level to about a 6-year experienced civil engineer. But I want to jump back a little bit to the beginning of this, because what's important to recognize here is that when we were sent home, we thought COVID was 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We had logged me in, and it was okay. But as a CAD manager, I tend to try to work in the same environment that I ask all the civil engineers to work in. And I've never been a fan of the log me in or remote desktop applications. It's very frustrating. And VPN was even worse. For those of you who have attempted to work AutoCAD through VPN, you know all of the crashes involved. Having that experience, that firsthand experience in trying to get a day's work done through these other means, really added fuel to the fire. And Chuck and I teamed up on this, and I think we presented a pretty good story. Now, a C-suite, executive suite decision-making team in a company typically wants to hear numbers, cost versus benefit. And we did that legwork, but also phrased this in your day-to-day work experience. If you've got 2/3 of your company who are bread and butter, they're the ones making the money for the company. Their work is what we charge for our clients as product, correct? They've got to be working efficiently. They've got to be somewhat content, preferably happy in their day-to-day work environment. Pitch that in a big way. And hats off to our C-suite, our executive team. They recognized it, and credibility for Chuck's history here at the firm, they gave it a nod. Honestly, I didn't expect it at first. That is one of the
challenges with a lot of folks that are out there is that do they already have credibility? Can they put that story together concisely? Do they have the math? Do they have that productivity numbers and the cost and the security so they can really give a comprehensive story to the exec team? Do they have a seat on the exec team? You know, those questions always come up. So these folks are going to be really interested in how it was that you were successful in that communication. I'm hearing credibility from Chuck's historically, which is beautiful to sort of build on, and then to have all that information. Later in this deck, we talked to you more about the technology and even some of the cost analysis a little bit that Workspot ends up gathering, and then we can share that with you guys as prospects that are out there as well. Yeah. So, by the way, the last thing we have on this slide here is the expansion into the future. As thought leaders, maybe you want to take just a moment and tell us what you're thinking about for your next act.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's our goal maybe be serverless, and you know, and that means we don't have physical servers at our offices. We only have a really good internet connection and a firewall and Wi-Fi. Right, and we're calling this maybe the Sherwood Everywhere program. This any employee can travel, you know, work remotely, work from the lake, you know, or on a beach, you know, on a hot spot, or they say, hey, I'm going to be in New York for 2 weeks. Can I work from the New York office? Right, and if we have every desk as a hotel desk, and we don't rely on servers at each office. Right, we don't have to worry about different login scripts. Oh, I'm in New York. I'm pointing all the way back to San Francisco. All that stuff just goes away, right? They connect to a central location in the cloud or multiple locations in the cloud, right? The one that's closest to them, and then they work on Workspot.
So what do you think? What's your timing on that? If you would look into your crystal ball in the future when you would be like completely in the cloud, and this is we have many customers that are thinking the same way. As this, do you got a sort of a feel?
Yeah, there is an investment that has to be made. You know, right now we had already invested in desktops at the office, so now we need to talk about investing in laptops for everyone. and docks. And then we also need to discuss, we have prepaid subscriptions. Like we paid our Panzera until 2023. So if we act before then, we're kind of missing out on what we already paid for.
Yeah.
And being realistic too, right? This isn't something that can happen in a month. And when I order computers right now, sometimes they're taking 3 to 4 months to arrive because of the global chip shortage. And
Mm-hmm.
that's another advantage of Workspot. I can immediately spin up an additional workstation on Workspot and not have to wait 3 to 4 months for a computer to arrive, right? And
Yeah.
then the user at home can use their home computer, right, to connect. So
Tremendous flexibility. And by the way, what we should do too is shift gears here just a little bit to talk more about just the opportunity that you mentioned, which is the resources that are available in the public cloud. Certainly Workspot creates an abstraction layer on top of Azure and Google Cloud to take all those billions of dollars of resources around the planet that have been invested and immediately acquire those, aggregate them together into a desktop or a workstation to make it available for a user. So you don't have to build out your data center, for 100 or 75 or whatever it is, and either be over or under provisioned, right? No, you can be precisely provisioned because Workspot will give you just the resources you want on that part of the planet that you need those. So that is pretty cool. You couldn't do this 5 or 6 or so years ago. It wasn't possible, but it is possible now, and that's really what changes everything. The question that I have for folks, and I've got a polling question here, right, is does your company have a cloud-first strategy? And a cloud-first strategy is basically, if we need some sort of capability in our company, we need to look to the cloud to see if there's a viable service for it first before we go and buy a server and install some software and configure it and do all that stuff, right? Now, it might be fully enforced across the company, or maybe it's up to each departmental buyer, or maybe you don't even have one at all. So let's get some of the voting in here and figure out exactly where you guys weigh in on this. Okay, so let's get some votes. We got some votes going. I'm going to go ahead and close the polls and share the results. And so take a look at that, Chuck, as far as a cloud-first strategy. Now, 63% don't today, and certainly that doesn't mean they're not using the cloud. It just means they don't have an actual strategy. Now, 13% is fully enforced, and 25, a quarter of the folks, have it, but it's up to those that departmentally are involved. Chuck, how would you reply to this? Oh, Chuck, are you on mute?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We got our feet wet back in 2014 with the cloud when we opted to get Panzera's solution, a hybrid cloud server in our offices, right? And it was pretty much hand-free, or I didn't really have to do much, right? I set up a bucket in AWS and don't worry about it, right? But when COVID happened, it really forced me to realize, well, I really should start taking advantage of cloud computing, right? So I could be precise, like Brad said. I don't, if if I get a colo and I get Citrix XenApp, or whatever solution like that, right? I have to pre-purchase a certain number of users, right? And what if the company downscales or expands tremendously, right? And then I exceed the number of licenses I have there. With Workspot, I could be very specific, like I need 22 people in this type of computer. I need 53 in this type, right? And there's a lot of cost savings there too. So I'm not over, what's the word? I'm not over
Over
deploying.
provisioned.
Yeah, over provisioning.
Yeah.
Or under provisioning.
Yeah, it's that surgical provision you get. You just like, boom, you're right on the needle. Just like you said, this many folks here and here. And by the way, if you have a project that finishes on the East Coast and you want to start one on the West, those licenses can be reallocated again. And so boom, boom, off you go. They should run in the region of the world that you need. And so that's cool. So the key to this question here is cloud strategy. When you start to figure this out as a company, you have this discussion across the company and you have a full-on cloud strategy that you leverage so that it's a coordinated effort. And you can't do what you guys were talking about on this slide here where you would go off to a serverless world unless you truly have a strategy. So get some experience, okay? Get that experience. Talk to folks like Chuck and Jim. Get that experience and then put a strategy together and start to execute against it. You will find, I certainly know with some other customers, that folks that haven't done this, their businesses are struggling, and folks that have are taking the business away from those that haven't done this. the productivity gains, and so many of our customers said we had a record revenue year last year. You know, it's because, yeah, we were able to hire anywhere in the world, make them productive, increase billable hours, and the projects were still running, and we ran away with that business. Be that company. That's your opportunity here. Now, the next question is, are you guys in Azure or Google Cloud today? Either one. And if you are, this is multiple choice. What are you doing? Do you have server workloads or data up there? Do you have authentication services or something else? Or are you totally not in the cloud yet? You know, that's the question here for this polling question. And again, it's multiple choice, so pick each of the ones that actually does apply to you today. So authentication service is pretty common, and you'll find, you know, whether it's this cloud or another cloud, you're going to start dabbling in that and going into that. Now, there's typically a percent of folks that haven't gone to the cloud at all. You know, that can be the case, and so we'll see that in the results here. So I'll take all those votes right there, close the polls, and then share that, and then look at that. So this is pretty similar. 63% auth, 50% are doing data. And by the way, when you talked about Panzera earlier, that's data management, doing file lock and sync and many other things that we can talk about more in a bit. And server workloads, and then only 13% not yet. Okay, now they might be in, you know, Amazon maybe, because I did specifically ask Azure and Google Cloud. Those are the two clouds currently that Workspot creates an abstraction layer on top of and then leverages. So what do you think about this, Chuck, from a multi-cloud perspective? How important is multi-cloud and getting these services up there for you as a company?
Yeah, it's very important. You know, Panzera recently came out with version 8 of the firmware that allows you to have multiple backups of your bucket. So if something were to happen to Amazon where we store our data, right, I could have a backup of that in Azure, and the Panzeras just switch. They just point over and we don't lose our data, right? So that's a huge advantage for a firm. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Another thing that happened with Workspot is when I spun up the back end with the domain controller and firewall, I kind of had an aha moment. I was like, wait a second, I could put my licensing server here, our accounting server here, right? And I don't have to buy these really expensive servers that sit at one location that's prone to a power outage, right? I could put them in the cloud, and then I could set up redundancy. So if, let's say there's some maintenance going on in Azure, right? I could have it spin up somewhere else, right? If we really wanted to go that far. But it's opened up so much for us.
And
Beautiful.
it's worth noting that all of this is in the background. Nobody's even aware of it. The user just sees a window on their computer and gets their work done.
Yeah, you know, it's like, you know, a Netflix movie or something like that. It's like, I don't really know where it's coming from. It seems to run on my phone and on my Mac and on my PC. It comes out of the cloud, and the experience seems to be good. So that's, you know, what we're suggesting here. The end user grabs the device that they like, and they can grab any device. And it's cool because you do have folks blended. You know, some folks want their PC and other folks are Mac people. But when they have their Mac on the monitors, they're pulling into their Windows 10 GPU accelerated workstation in the cloud and cranking away. And when they disconnect, they're still on their Mac. So that's the notion of BYOD, bring your own device. You guys support that? You want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, you know, when COVID started, we could not afford to buy everyone a computer. And even if we were, I don't control their home networks, right? So there's definitely a security aspect there. I'm not going to allow home computers to VPN into a domain, right, and work and expose our firm to viruses or things their roommates are doing, or husband or wife, right, on their home network. So really, by having this bring your own device or bring your own home, you know, concept where people use their personal computers to connect, we provide the virtual computer, right? A lot of users love that because they love their personal computer. They already have it set up with all their bookmarks and the way they want it, right? That it's their own personal thing. And then when they open Workspot, make it full screen, it literally feels like you're on another computer. So we're not affecting any of their personal life, right? You know, or their computer setup, right? It really separates the two in a positive way.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we jump in and give them a look at this? We'll give them a live demo. So Chuck, you know, we'll start with you, and then Jim, we'll pop over to you. and share what this looks like from an end user's perspective, okay? So let me go over to Chuck and send you the presenter. You can share your screen.
Okay. Hopefully
And
you see.
yeah, there we go.
Yep.
We can see it. That
Yep.
looks good.
So right now I'm in full screen on Workspot on just one monitor. You have the option to do, I believe, 3 or more if you have 3 or more at home. But right now I just set it for 1. And you can see up here that my connection is fairly good to our Workspot instance, which is in Texas. And I'm going to minimize this. And so this is a program I'm going to use just to demonstrate the CPU power of one of the highest end Workspot machines. So I'm going to open up Task Manager, and I'll go to Performance, and I'll look at the CPU here, and I'm actually going to change it to logical processors. So I can see here I have 16 logical processors. And this program really does GPU rendering. It doesn't do graphics card rendering. This software is used in the movie industry a lot. It simulates atmospheric effects, clouds. If you've watched movies, you've seen this before. It's used in the show Drain the Ocean too, on National Geographic. But this is the Earth real world scale. And I'm at the Kármán line, 100 kilometers in space. And I'm just going to render the scene here. So as I render, you can see all the CPUs are going to 100%. The nice thing about this is I don't have to use my personal computer at work to do renderings, right? And possibly fry my home computer, right? I could do it on Workspot. If something happens to that machine, I just spin up a new one, right? It's not my problem, it's Microsoft. So here's a rendering, and it's very fluid. I literally feel like I'm on another computer. I'm gonna go in here and just zoom in a little bit more so everyone can see it one more time. I'm going to try to capture the thin blue line, you know, that we hear the astronauts talk about when they go to space. I'll turn on some GPU rendering. So we should see the GPU increase here a little bit. This is a beta feature that they're trying out. So I'm seeing some activity down here in the GPU. But I'll just set this as the current scene, and I'll do one more render. And then I think we're going to pass it to Jim here. So let me render this screen, see if we get any of there we go. We can almost see outer space and starting to see the atmosphere rendering. And this is fairly fast. I do this on other computers, and it takes, instead of 20 seconds, it takes a minute. All right, so.
And the CPUs and GPUs are cranking away. It's nice you can see them down here.
Yeah. So there, the scene's completed, took 26 seconds, right? So yeah, that's a huge advantage. We do a lot of high-end high-end simulations, climate simulations on these machines. And then the nice thing, you can minimize it and go do other work on your personal computer, like, oh, I need to catch up on these emails, right? Or I forgot to submit this expense report, right? Do my timesheets, right? While that stuff renders in the cloud on a separate computer.
You know, and it's interesting. You can't tell from the demo, but it'll span multiple monitors. So when you do connect up to your Workspot workstation in the cloud, if you have 2, 3 monitors and so forth, it just takes them all over. And so it looks, if someone walked up behind you, they'd say, where is that monster workstation under your desk? I don't see it, because it looks like it's taking over the entire workstation, and it is, but it's out of the cloud. It spans them all cleanly, and you can work and drag your windows around and get working and so forth, and then minimize the whole thing, and then you're back to your Mac or your PC device that you have at home. So that's cool. So thanks, Chuck. We'll pop it over to Jim now. Let me go ahead and give Jim presenter, and then we'll take a look at the CAD applications running. There you go, Jim.
All right, so you should be seeing a typical AutoCAD work session.
Yep.
Right on.
Right on.
And what this looks like in a day-to-day functionality, I mean, Chuck was showing you some pretty cool rendering capabilities, and we don't do that every day, and that's not necessarily what we get paid for every day. Our bread and butter is pretty basic civil engineering stuff. In my preferred work style, I use Workspot as a portal on one window, and I continue to run things like Gmail, because I'm in chats all day long with 50 plus different civil engineers. Basically it's a help desk, chit-chatting, keeping up on the Kardashians and whatnot. But here we go. This is the work. This is the boring stuff that we get paid to do day in, day out. And it looks just like another window. Behind it is my desktop, my home computer, my daughter riding a horse up in the Sierra. And this is my virtual computer that is somewhere not here, like Brad was talking about. This is not my laptop. This is not a desktop underneath my desk. This is AutoCAD. It's pulling a file from the cloud. It's composing it here in my RAM. And now I'm working through a virtual computer somewhere else. So this window is typical AutoCAD. There's a whole bunch of stuff showing up, and I'll take you on a real quick tour. Typical work tool space for Civil 3D. I'm going to close it out so we have a little more room. Sheet Set Manager, you can see that one of my files open, not this particular file, so I've got more in the background open. A Sheet Set Manager for an entire deliverable, design deliverable. I'll close that out. I'm running a split screen because what we have here is a classic AutoCAD corridor, a roadway that's running through a fairly varied terrain, an undulating surface. And I'm down below in a split screen. We've got all of the Civil 3D sections and alignment profiles that are generated off of this model. Now, even if you're running this on your local C drive and you're reading the files that are here, that I have right here physically, it's AutoCAD that's the limitation, right? Anybody here who has used the software recognizes there's processing time in Autodesk products. And it's pretty much the same when you're working through Workspot. You're using that CPU. It's still using RAM. It's just not the RAM on your computer. So it's pretty cool that way. Now, what's happening at the same time, because of information that we have cloud-based, I've got a tool palette off to the side here, minimize my XREFs again. We've got a tool palette over here, and this is how we've built up a system that allows civil engineers in offices across the country and now in Central America and potentially Europe to use the exact same set of symbols and standards that we used in our home office back when we were only 35 people. So I can build this all in a cloud-based file structure that I can manage in one location. There's no more sending out files to everybody in different offices to load up so we have the same kind of thing at our disposal. The functionality is improved.
Yeah, that's amazing because you said earlier that the data is on Panzera, right? And so now with that, you can access, everyone accesses the same controlled version of it. So there's no revision writing over someone and someone else and so forth, right? So you got super high speed access in the cloud, accessing the files to open up the models, to make edits and to save the models out. So read times and write times are faster than they've ever been before. You're never waiting for that. You got all the GPU that's helping you visually, and you have the CPUs doing the computational work, kind of like Chuck showed earlier. And so that user experience is amazing. Now, if you only have a single screen, you can work on a single screen. If you can dock it into something with multiple monitors, you get to take advantage of all that. And it's wherever you are. You could be at home, you could be at a customer site, you could be at a cabin, you could be at, a coffee shop. You're always going to rely on it. Now, what's really cool too is you can set off one of those renders cranking in the background and then, close your laptop and drive to your cabin and open it up. And when you get there, your render and your job is all done and you go, thank you. Because that thing is always running for you and can be counted on in the cloud, Now, the other thing that's really cool is the way Panzera can help you with version controlling, and because the topic of ransomware comes up quite a bit here. So do either one of you want to talk about that in Panzera? Chuck, is that a topic of yours, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll briefly talk about it. I sleep well at night knowing that we're with Panzera, because if we were to get ransomware somehow, it broke through all our other security measures we have in place. All I have to do is roll back the folder or the entire directory to the previous hour. Those versioning, the versioning of Panzera that happens every hour, I have it every hour for every day for every week, right? It goes all the way back 10 years. I could restore something from 7 years ago when we got Panzera.
Wow.
It's amazing. And you cannot touch those versions, right? Even a hacker getting into AWS will not be able to touch it, right?
Mm.
So very, very powerful. And then the real-time file locking is huge. When I started at Sherwood, we had 2 offices, San Francisco, New York. They had their own servers, their own islands of data, right? And it was a huge pain because all of a sudden New York needed work because they completed a project. I would literally have to spend an entire evening copying one of our projects over the internet to the New York office. And I know a lot of companies have gone the route of setting up replication between sites, but that's complicated and expensive. And you need someone to manage that 100% of the time, right? So with Panzera, it's been worry-free, and it's really allowed us to expand because all we need to do now is drop a new Panzera into a new office, right? Everyone sees the same files, right? They're not starting from scratch, right? And deviating from the company standards.
Yeah, and as you go to multiple regions up in the cloud, you'll have your Workspot workstations. You've got them centralized right now. You could pop some on the West Coast, the East Coast, wherever you need them in the world, and have a Panzera replicant there to do lock and sync as it does, right? So you don't get any versioning issues, and then to actually take every revision and keep it padlocked, as you said. So that's beautiful. Ransomware is a bad thing. If you can keep your users in line where they keep their data off their hard drive effectively, even in their Workspot, they keep it off the C in the Workspot, keep it in those network shares that you give them that are either Panzera, or OneDrive or Dropbox for other types of files and so forth, that can go a long way, that's for sure. Now, one thing I wanted to do is,
Brad, do you still have my screen up by chance?
yeah, totally.
Yeah, so, and to all of that, I just want, everyone to be able to see what that means in the day-to-day workload. So I brought up one of our standard sheets. This is a simple site plan. I mean, simple, right? Except not so. There are almost 30 extra files that compose this sheet. None of this is on anybody's local server or C drive. As soon as I close this is all available to anybody else in the firm that has access to this Workspot.
Yeah, so collaboration couldn't be any better. It's like you're editing and doing this, and then they have access to it, but no, there's no copies, there's no VPN connections, no security holes, no versioning issues.
Unmatched. And I have to admit, when I came into this firm, Chuck had been here a year or two longer than I, and I was the guy yelling at people to get off my lawn. I did not want to see this. I was used to working on my C drive. I could predictably run large files. It took a while for me to get used to it, and I was won over. If you can win me over, you can probably win over your C-suite decision makers.
That's key. But you're right. There is sort of precedent for folks to go, it could never work because they've attempted it years ago and it didn't work. But things are different now. Public clouds are there. Security is there. The investments are there. It's time. Now is the time. So you guys are a great example of that. Let me grab the screen back here and take a look at a few things as we wrap up here. And first of all, Jim, thanks for sharing that. And we do have a picture here of your desktop, right? So you could have any laptop you want, multiple monitors back there. Anything you'd like to comment here? Oh, and your nice little coffee mug.
Yeah, my Workspot swag. Yeah, I will comment. I mentioned earlier that I like to work with equipment that the production staff, the civil engineers are using, and it gives me a real good idea of what they face day in, day out. I'm actually underpowered, relatively speaking, but all this is a 7000 series Dell laptop. It's nothing fancy, a couple years old, in fact. In the wintertime, when I want to go do my ski thing, throw this thing in my backpack. I get up to my cabin, which has okay internet connection, not fantastic, but I'm working again. I'm able to jump in and out of meetings because, again, you can run 2 different sessions. You've got your Workspot, you've got your standard G Suite, if that's what you're using. Flexibility is amazing. Started testing this out. We had senior engineer at a different firm that worked from a hotspot at the beach in Costa Rica. I had one of my guys who took a surf trip to Baja and on the beach at a little Cabana in Todos Santos, for those of you
Mm,
in
mm.
the area,
It can work
worked for
anywhere.
2 weeks. It's very easy to do.
You
And
know,
I
I got
really
a question for
got
you.
a
I got
hot
a
spot
question
on a
for you.
sailboat.
On the sailboat too. I got a question for you. It just came in from Brian, and he asks, do you use these instances for collaboration software for conferencing like AV, and what is that experience like? So this is a good picture for that, because you could actually have the AV potentially conferencing software running in Workspot, but you could also, in that diagram on the top 2 monitors sort of in the background, you could be working Workspot back there. And in the front, laptop screen, which is the local screen, you could run the conferencing software in the local space. So you're not running the audio video over, multiple remote connections. You're running the audio video where it's rich, and then you have the applications running back there in the back. So there's a number of ways you can do that. And the best thing to do as an attendee of the webinar is check in with us. We give you, just like Chuck mentioned earlier, we'll give you a desktop or a workstation in a sandbox. It's just your own version of it in the cloud, and you test out all your apps and your data yourself and feel that experience that these guys shared with you. And Chuck, there's another question from Brian, which is, how are you authenticating to these instances? Are they joined on your domain, or are you using Modern Auth or something else?
Yeah, because we have a domain controller in Workspot, it's seamless. It talks back to our master domain controller in San Francisco. And if in San Francisco, if I go there and change someone's password for AD, right, it will reflect automatically in Workspot within 15 minutes as it's replicated across AD. And yeah, I treat it like another office, right? I don't, even though it's all virtual, right? To me, it's structured as an office, right? So
Nice.
yeah, hopefully that answers the question, Brian.
Yeah, I think that's cool. That's the idea. And we're going to wrap up here just talking about the configurations here. So users are looking for more and more performance all the time. The applications are demanding it, and the users are being more productive with it. So it makes sense. So we, with our customers, have supported lots of different super interesting applications. Some are banging on a unit processor, some are multi-threaded, some are hitting the GPUs hard, as you saw some of the examples today. So there's a lot of applications out there that'll work quite well. And the cool part about the public cloud, it can be thought of as evergreen. The CPUs, the GPUs are always being replaced with faster. Solid state drives are faster. Network is faster. There's another region that's even closer to you, so now it's even less latency. It just gets better with the billions of dollars of investments in the public cloud. Workspot creates the abstraction layer on top of that and then vectors that all out and hands it to you. Well, just last year, AMD came out and popped in a massive a GPU that you can use either the whole thing or half or quarter or an eighth of it. And with that, we can actually productize that. And you see these points on the price performance curve. The first 3 on the bottom is CPU. Do you want small, medium, or large? Sort of faster, just desktops. And then the next 4 is the GPU. Do you want an eighth, a quarter, a half, or a full GPU for whatever you're doing, right? And we have a way to work with our customers to create this table for all these different applications that you might have running out there, so that you know which one is just right for your particular user with their apps you're using. You don't want to over or under provision, you want to dial it in. And Chuck, you have a mechanism in your organization that uses this sort of math as well, is that right?
Yeah, Jim and I came up with a scoring system for our staff, like, do they need a GPU or not, right? There's obviously cost implications there. So we based it on their efficiency during COVID, their seniority, right? And also some other factors related to COVID. And it came up with a score between 0 to 1.5, right? And we found if they exceeded 1, then they needed a GPU. So we ultimately decided with approximately 50 users with a non-GPU machine, and those are typically DE1s and 2s. But then we have DE3s and other power users that absolutely need Adobe Creative Cloud, InfraWorks, other 3D software, right? So we have 22 people in the GPU class, and then we have an additional 3 people in the high-end GPU class, myself being one of them, because we're doing very complex climate simulations or 3D renderings, right? That take a long time on traditional machines, right? We're taking advantage of the additional RAM, the additional CPUs and threads that are available.
Nice, and that's perfect to get them on that price performance curve where they fit. It's the Goldilocks zone, as we talked about. I got another question. This one's from Vitali. But before I show that, just let me ask you a quick polling question. Thanks for joining us today and giving us your time. We know we want to follow up with you guys, but tell us the best way we can follow up with you. If you want to connect with our product specialist and spend more time with us, that product specialist will even give you a $50 gift card. If you're okay, that's cool. If you want some more additional emails and information like that, just let us know. All right, so just pop those responses in there. And then the last question I've got from Vitaly is, have you moved, or how have you handled moving file servers to Azure? We have huge file servers and are hesitant on moving them. So any thoughts there on managing and moving large file sets?
Yeah, when we moved to Panzera in 2014, we set up the Panzera. We had our old servers already running, and I just started doing robocopies. It's a Windows tool, right? And that ran for a month. And I did it multiple times to get all the errors out, like all the open files, right? And I had logs that could verify I got 100% of the data, right? And even if I wasn't for sure, when I turned on Panzera and everyone pointed to that, I kept that old server running for 6 months, just in case, Robocopy missed something. So that's what firms would have to do if they don't currently have Panzera, right? But because we had Panzera, when we got Workspot, all I did is I went to Azure, said create new virtual machine. Oh, look, there's a Panzera template, right? Create. And then I had the sizer information from Panzera. Oh, this needs 16 cores, 64 gigs of RAM, right? I plug that into Azure, start server. Boom, I have a Panzera server running. All the data is already there.
And by the way, there's a number of different ways of moving large files into Azure or Google Cloud. You can move them into the file system. You could use some of the cloud's capabilities of file management. You could use third party like Panzera and maybe some others as well. And there's a number of ways of doing it. And I think what I'm finding is for yourself and for others, Panzera has been a kind of a proven way that it not only manages, it does versioning and file lock and sync and so forth, but many other things. So we're hearing, Panzera there a lot, certainly with our customers as well. And it's not required. You can move it up there into your file system. But what is key is to move it up there so that you get those desktops and those workstations tightly coupled to those files. Just research file management and put the best file manager up there, because you have an opportunity for version controlling to help you against ransomware. Don't miss out on that opportunity now that you're moving them up there. But if you get those things tightly coupled, your end users are going to love that blinding fast open and write speed that they get from file access. And while they're in the cloud, they're also going to access anything else that's on the internet at gigabit speeds oftentimes, depending on your firewall and how things are set up. They have the opportunity for that. Hey, so Vitaly says thank you for the answer, by the way, Chuck. So thank you very much. And thank you to the whole audience. We are a wrap here at the end of our webinar. Thanks for sticking around for just a couple of minutes extra here. Sherwood design engineers moving civil engineering to the cloud. What a great topic. What a great inspiration that you guys are for everyone. I just want to thank the audience for coming today and for your questions. And then and we'll certainly get back to you guys in the way you asked us to reach out to you. So let me say thank you to the team here. First of all, thank you, Chuck, for joining us today. Couldn't appreciate it more.
Thank you.
And Jim, I don't know where you are in the world. It could be anywhere. But thanks. But thanks for connecting in and telling your inspirational story. And we'll have to do this again, because I know your timeline is never done. It's got a ... over on the right-hand side. And we're going to learn much more from you guys. And we can't thank you enough for what you shared today. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, thanks to everyone out there. Remember, this has been recorded, so the next email you'll get from me will be a link to the recording and responses to any other questions that you might have. So thanks for joining today. We do hope we see you again on future webinar series with Workspot. Take care, everyone, and talk soon. Bye-bye.